Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. So today we got something a little exciting. We have the Syndra midscope update coming to the PvE, and there's a lot of changes, and I've read through them, and they are quite interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go line by line, kind of, talking about it, and then at the end we'll maybe talk about what the changes mean as a whole, and maybe if there are any other changes I would like to see. So starting off with the passive, Syndra collects up to 120 splinters via damaging enemy champions and gaining levels. Splinters of Wrath enhance Syndra and her abilities. So this is very much like Victor passive sort of, and as you can see, it kind of rewards scaling, gaining levels as you can see here. Syndra restores 20 to 215 mana whenever she collects a splinter from an enemy. She gains splinters via damaging an enemy champion with 2 abilities within 4 seconds. So basically, if you can combo someone with more than, just hitting them with your Q. Leveling up grants Syndra 5 splinters of Wrath, killing a cannon minion grants 1 splinter of Wrath, and at 120 splinters, Syndra gains 15% total AP. So this is very, very interesting. As you can see, they're already going for a more scaling approach, but they're still trying to reward you for actually like hitting your abilities and stuff like that. So we'll probably have to look at the other abilities first, but we'll definitely come back to this. Base health down by 30 at level 1. Definitely a nerf to Syndra's early game, but Syndra's early game is very strong already. Now, this is the big one. Cooldown on Q from 4 seconds to 7 seconds. Now, Syndra has basically the lowest cooldown, like spammable kind of like laning ability in the early game. You've got stuff like Cassio E, for example, but it's not really something you can harass with. Like when you think of a lot of these lane bullies, you're thinking champions like Syndra or Orianna that have cooldowns like 4 seconds, Orianna Q is 6 seconds, that can harass pretty much non-stop, and that's really where a lot of Syndra's strong lane comes from. So they've nerfed this heavily, which is going to make Syndra's early game a lot weaker combined with the base health, so this could be quite interesting. Mana cost down at later ranks, just trying to make it so it doesn't cost too much mana later in the game. Sphere duration is up by a little, so a bit easier to get kind of those big ults. Now, at 40 Splinters of Wrath, Dark Sphere can store 2 charges with a 1 second between cost. I think this is very, very cool. I always like that. One thing I really like is when they upgrade abilities like Victor E, for example. I really like it when it changes how the ability functions and doesn't just like add more damage to it. I think it's like sometimes a little boring when it's just like, okay, when fully maxed or when upgraded, it just gives you 10% increased damage. Like that can be powerful, right? But I think it's like way cooler when they add some sort of extra effect to it. So I'm a big fan of this, and I think having 2 Q charges is going to be very, very fun to play with. So I'm really looking forward to that. Sphere pickup detection radius on W from 400 to 450. I guess this is just making it a bit easier to pick up the actual ball instead of sometimes like if you don't click on it properly, you'll pick up like a creep or something next to it. At least I think that's what that means. Now prevents non-sphere units from dying for a brief period when picked up. Now that's really interesting. So I guess this means like if you pick up creeps or you pick up like jungle camps or something, it prevents them from dying. I'm honestly not really sure what this is used for. Like, yeah, I'm not sure what I would use this for. I guess maybe you can use it to kind of mess with someone's last hitting or something. But like, you can only, yeah, it would be like for trolling your teammates or something, right? Like you're trying to stop your teammate from getting a cannon, so you pick it up. Yeah, I'm trying to see like how would you use this? I guess maybe there could be something, like if you pick up like a red buff or something, throw it back to your enemy, but it would have to be kind of low. So yeah, I'm honestly not really sure. Maybe I'm missing something here. I'm not really sure what we would use this for. 60 Splinters of Wrath. Force of Will does an additional 15% plus 1.5% per 100 AP true damage. Okay, now this is very powerful, but I think it's kind of not super interesting. So yeah, like it's definitely really strong, and it does feel quite good to have true damage. And I guess like you can sort of say this is changing how the ability functions, but it does feel a little bit like this isn't really going to cause me to use my W any differently. I guess maybe it could mean that I might use my W on tanks because like it'll actually do true damage as opposed to just like magic damage like before. But I would actually like to see this be something a little more interesting, something that would change the function of the ability a bit more, like perhaps increase range or something could be kind of cool. I don't know. I don't really want to complain because this is definitely powerful and it does feel kind of good to have true damage, but I would like to see this be something just a little more exciting. Like maybe it still does true damage, maybe it does less true damage, but it also gains some increased range or something like that. I'm not sure. I definitely don't think it's bad, but I think this could be a little more interesting. So on the E, magic damage is down, just down by 10 at base and down more at later ranks. Also, the AP ratio is down. Now, the scatter angle has been increased from 34 degrees to 56 degrees, so this makes it kind of easier to hit your stuns. I guess I guess this makes it easier to hit your stuns, which is kind of interesting because I think hitting Syndra's stun was it's like hitting the QE was kind of difficult, right? Like if you've got like just a couple balls on the ground, obviously, but if you ult someone, which is how most Syndras do it, there wasn't really like a skill to it at all, right? Like you would ult someone first and then you press E and it's pretty much impossible to miss. So I guess this is meant to make like your regular QE combos a bit easier. So that's kind of I guess it's good for the average player, sure. Now cooldown down from 18 to 14 to a flat 15. So this is trying to make it so that you don't max E second. I actually like this as a change quite a lot because I think that before you have to max E second, because just maxing E second is a lot better, but it actually feels a lot better to max W second because it just does a lot more damage. And again, like I think the true damage feels a lot better. So I'm actually glad that they kind of made this so that you max it last and made it a bit better just like at its base rank. So I actually think this is a really good change. Stun duration is down 1.5 to 1.25. Yeah, it's kind of whatever. Reduce failure chances of close range EQ combos. So I guess this is again just like making this a bit easier. At 80 Splinters of Wrath, Scatter the Weak's cone is increased from 56 degrees to 84 degrees and also slows enemies by 70% for 1.25 seconds applied after initial CC. So this is very, very strong. And I really like this. I think this is a really cool upgrade. Like obviously it makes the cone bigger and adds a slow on top. So I think it really changes the functionality of the ability. So I'm very happy about that. And it also just looks very strong. Like that is a lot of CC that you're going to apply out. I think a lot of the time the stun only really needs to be long enough for you to kind of like follow up with your damage, right? And I think 1.25 seconds will still be long enough to do that. And then on top of that, applies the slow on them after. And now because Q like has a 1 second between casts, this will actually give you long enough that you can hit a Q on a slowed target here, like a second Q. So I think this works together really well, and it looks quite interesting. The ult. So as you put points in R, it grants your Q additional ability haste. So this is basically just trying to, they want it so that you can still spam Q like later in the game, but they don't want to make its cooldown so low that just Syndra automatically bullies every lane like she does right now. So I think again, this is kind of a clever change that solves some of this problem while still allowing it to feel quite fun. You know, like you can still spam spheres a lot in the late game. Damage per sphere on ultimate is down a little bit, but at 100 Splinters of Wrath, it executes champions below 15% max health. This is quite interesting. I think this is, again, I actually think this is quite cool. While it doesn't, again, it feels like something that maybe doesn't hugely change how you're going to use the ability. Like, you know how it's kind of a bit on the fence about like the W change. I think it's just like you're gonna feel so good about executing people below 15% max HP. So I actually think this is gonna be really fun. Like you're just gonna pop people. So how do I kind of feel about the changes overall? Well, it's very clear that they've gone for a scaling approach. You know, they've got stuff like one, obviously the Splinter passive kind of rewards you scaling up over the game. You've got like this extra total AP when you hit 120 splinters. Obviously, your abilities upgrade as you go through the game, and a lot of her early game has been nerfed. So this is kind of it's interesting. Like I think Syndra'S is kind of a problematic champion for Riot to balance because before like it wasn't that Syndra really like fell off late game. It's rather that Syndra you didn't really like have to get ahead, but you couldn't fall behind. You had to be at least even at best. And Syndra's playstyle was like, it was very, I want to say like precise. I'm not sure if, is that even the right word? What I'm trying to say basically is that like before, right? You had to really play Syndra's like laning phase well. You could do a lot with Syndra in the laning phase because you only had a 4-second queue, but like the only people that were really getting kind of like I guess getting the most out of Syndra's kit were like very, very high level players. Like I'd even say the average Challenger Syndra player before was not even like close to getting like the max out of Syndra's kit. So there's definitely a champion that was extremely problematic, kind of like Ryze was before, where it's just so powerful in pro play that it makes it kind of difficult to balance for the average player because, you know, if you tune it up, it just takes over pro play, gets picked and banned every game. And then like if you make it weaker so that pros can't do that, then it just kind of becomes a sort of meh champion for everyone else. So I think when I look at a kind of like mini rework like this, there's kind of two things I'm thinking about. Like one, is it a balanceable kit in the first place? You know, like a lot of the time they rework a champion and you look at the kit and it just looks like super overloaded and there's no kind of like tuning knobs that you can kind of fix or that you can change to do that. And I think like when Rise was kind of nerfed to where he is now, they took away a lot of those things that were difficult to tune before. Stuff like the shields and the like huge amounts of extra movement speed and the huge amounts of like damage and mana scaling. Like they changed a lot of this to be a lot more tunable, basically, so that it was like easier again for them to kind of balance them. Now, the second thing I think of, and something I think they really messed up with Rise, is does the update actually make the champion more fun? And I think in Rise's case, the answer was actually no. In fact, I think that Rise kind of, when Rise was reworked, he was still quite problematic in different ways. Like rather than the shields and stuff being really strong, it was actually like now Rise just like generated permanent priority in basically every matchup. And that was quite hard to tune because it was like if you nerf a lot of this stuff, it's like only pro players are really using this. So his win rate goes like way down in solo queue. And also it's like the champs still remained very difficult. Like before, Rise was very difficult from a combo perspective. They made Rise's combos really easy, you know, like just the EQ meme, but they actually still made Rise quite hard playstyle wise because he has to snowball the early game and he's very short range. So again, it still remained very difficult for the average player, and you saw that like Rise remained very strong in pro play after his rework, and he was like weak for in solo queue, at least for the average player, for a very long time. So coming back to that, like, does this make Syndra more fun? And I think the answer is actually yes. Like, while there is stuff that I'm gonna miss in the early game, you know, like being able to harass with Q nonstop, I think overall there's some really cool stuff here. Like having 2 charges on Q, I think, is going to be really fun. Executing people below 15% max HP is going to be fun. Obviously, wider stuns, having a slow, you know, this 15% total AP, and also like kind of having a little mini game in the game. I actually like when champions have something like this, when there's something kind of like to focus on beyond just like the game itself. I don't know if that really makes sense, but I really like when champs have a mini game like stacking or, you know, like a way like their combo works, like Aurelia has to get to 4 stacks, or they have like energy management or something. I think mana management is kind of boring, honestly, so I'm actually really glad that they got this. Now, there are a few changes in here that I'm still kind of not sure about. Like, I think Syndra restoring mana whenever she collects a splinter from an enemy, this is kind of a weird one, because I think it's like, does Syndra really need this? Like, I guess it's so that later in the game, it allows you to still spam your abilities. This is more like, I think this could potentially be good. Like, I think you really don't want Syndra to be building a lot of mana in order to, like, function properly. You know, like, I don't want her to be really gated by mana. I want her to be able to build, like, those damage items, ideally not building tier and stuff like that. So, like, this is nice for that reason. It just feels like it might be a bit too much. Like, I'm not sure if Syndra actually needs this, because they've nerfed their mana costs and stuff like that, right? Or at least by a little. And like Syndra already, I mean, I guess like sometimes she has mana things. I guess this is one that I'm really just kind of curious to see how it plays out in game. It could potentially be really nice just to allow Syndra to spam. And it also just could potentially, you know, Syndra has so much mana that she doesn't think about mana at all. But the good news is this is quite tunable, obviously, based on numbers. So it's kind of whatever. Another change that I'm sort of not sure about is, where was it? I'm sort of not sure about like the scatter angle being so much higher. Again, it's like much easier for the average player, but it does kind of feel like it nerfs Syndra's skill cap a little bit. But I don't know, maybe that's what they want. I guess overall, to kind of TLDR it, I think Syndra is, for most players, well, actually pretty much everyone, is going to be more fun. So I think they've definitely succeeded with that. And I also think the playstyle, like the scaling playstyle, is definitely going to be, well, one, like for a start, she is going to scale better than she does now. And she is going to be significantly weaker early game. I think that's good for, it's good for the current meta. Like after the like durability patch and after the season 12 changes, scaling is heavily incentivized. So similar to Talia, they kind of made an early game champion into a scaling champion. So it's actually good for the meta now. I do think that her blind pick ability could be a lot, yeah, it's just like maybe harder to blind pick her compared to before, given that her early game looks to be a lot weaker with lower base health and higher cooldown. And yeah, but overall, I think the changes are very, very cool. And I think they did a lot of things in here that were very clever. They still preserved kind of like the identity of the champion of being able to one-shot people, but they also like gave themselves like some interesting way to tune things. I think upgrading abilities is very fun. And I also like that they, well, I think there are some things in the kit that are maybe a bit too forgiving. Like I said, like maybe she shouldn't have so much mana. maybe the scatter angle is a bit too high. I do like that they've kind of made the champion a bit more accessible almost. Like I think most of her skill cap is still here. Like she's still got a lot of skill shots. She still gets rewarded for like hitting multiple skill shots in a row. Obviously late game is she's going to have like absurdly low cooldowns. And if you can get a lot out of those, like you're going to be really rewarded for it. But it also kind of made it a bit more accessible for the average player. And on top of that, no coincidence, they also are releasing a new Syndra skin. I thought that was quite funny. As she is getting reworked, they are releasing a new skin. Looks like this in game. I think this is kind of cool. It's kind of cool skin. I thought I'd put that in there. So again, TLDR once and for all, I think a lot weaker early game. Should be way stronger late game. Overall, I think it's a change in the right direction. Still maybe a couple things to look at, but I think it's really good. It's probably going to be pretty fun, and I'm really looking forward to it. So guys, if you did like the video, go ahead and like and subscribe, and I'll be really interested to see what you guys think of it. So let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time.